Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
Excited, too. 8 cups of coffee, and I'll do it to you. And welcome to episode 38 of
Don't Die Dumb.
I wanted to talk about the separation of church and state. So I've seen when religion gets involved, where a good example is a city in Minnesota, where one side wanted to put Sharia law in place, one of the most oppressive, sexist law you can think of. And the other side wanted to force all religions out of their city except for evangelical Christians. It is so, the forefathers did not, and people say, well, it's not in the Constitution. I believe it's Article 4 of the amendments of the Emolument Clause.
The separation of church and state.
Yeah.
It's the First Amendment.
First Amendment.
And, well, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, the point is the forefathers, we left England because the king said, God told me I'm better than you, and you got to follow the Church of England or get out. Or in the rule of, I believe it was Queen Mary, they burned people at the stake. So they left England to get away from that. And now we're getting back into it seems. But that's not what the forefathers wanted.
So there seems to be a pretty deep misunderstanding about the role of freedom of religion at the beginning of the country. So before all that, there was the Roman Catholic Church, which was a very dominant power in Europe. And there was England, which was a very dominant power in Europe. And the British kings were not happy with the fact that they were, to some extent, beholden to the Roman Catholic Church, like Trump kissing Xi's ring or something. And so they created the Anglican Church, which is the Roman Catholic Church, but with the British king as its head instead of the Pope. And
now, let me interrupt you because I have a question. Is that where the King James Bible came from?
Not sure about that, but that's got an interesting story too.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the goal was to have the church under the control of the king so that the king wouldn't be answerable to the Pope. Neither one of them gave a damn about the citizens, by the way. They were fighting each other for power, but they weren't interested in the well-being of the citizens of Europe. So in America, they wanted to get away from some of that. Now, when I was a kid, I heard that the Puritans came to America for religious freedom. No, they came to America for the same reason Hobby Lobby did, for the freedom to oppress everybody but themselves. They were being oppressed by someone else. They wanted to be the oppressors. That's not the same as religious freedom. And finally, I keep hearing all the time that this country was founded by and for Christians. It was not. It was founded by deists and Masons. That's who most of the founding fathers were. And they explicitly did not want to make this a country beholden to any one religion. Now, almost everybody who thinks this country should be a theocracy hates the idea of Sharia law. But that is exactly what we'd have. We would just have it under a Christian rubric. So the separation of church and state was not just to protect the state from religion, but to protect religion from the state. And Jesus himself said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. There is a separate realm of things that the state is responsible for versus what religion's responsible for. We've talked before about how evangelicals are looking forward to the apocalypse. Well, okay, if that's your religion and you think, great, I want to be here when the apocalypse happens and everybody suffers and I get to watch, okay, that's your thing. But you wouldn't build a government around that. The role of government is stability and the well-being of its members. So the reasons for separation of church and state are not opposition to religion. They are because they are separate jobs and should be done separately. Just the same reason that physicians aren't qualified to run hospitals. That's an administrative task, not a medical one. Some physicians are because they've cross-trained. But in the old days, hospitals and hospital systems were run by physicians, and they often didn't do well economically. Nowadays, they are run by business majors, and they often don't do well medically. But the business side of the hospital and the medical side of the hospital require protection from each other because they have separate priorities. That is the same reason to separate church and state.
Now, let me back up the train a little. You said the nation was founded by Deists and Masons.
Yes.
Masons that's not a religion. Those
No.
are the guys that drink with the Shriners, right?
That's right, right. Shriners are a subset of the Masons. And Masons are not per se a religion. They have a lot of quasi-religious trappings, but what they really are is a semi-secret society that's basically a do-gooder society. They're an NGO. Masons are a kind of NGO.
And what are Deists?
Deists, Thomas Jefferson would be a good example. George Washington was both. Deists believe, and by the way, the Old Testament, the very Old Testament, is kind of on this page, that the universe was created by a super entity of some sort. But once it was created, that super entity sort of let go and stepped back and said, well, let's see what happens. So to a deist, the universe is created by a supreme being, but he doesn't micromanage the events of it on an ongoing basis. Now, I'm less clear on Jewish theology, so please, some of you write in and tell me how much I'm getting wrong. But if I understand correctly, in Jewish theology, the creator of the universe, the demiurge, is not Yahweh, the one who's running it now. So they do believe in some sort of personal supreme being who actually manages things more or less on an ongoing basis. And Christians believe that every single atom is managed at every single moment of every single day. So they take that, to the other extreme. So deists are, I started the top spinning, and then I stood back to see what it would do.
Now, a lot of today's Christians will say, well, at least let us have the Ten Commandments. Put the Ten Commandments in school. 10 Commandments are a bit redundant. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt not steal. Just say lay off, and people should get it. But you're still forcing religion on the people. And people will say, well, the founding fathers didn't force religion on the people. In the words of Chief Tecumseh, he said, you tell us all of our gods are false, and you have the one true God. But when he came here, you told us you tortured and killed him.
Yeah.
Who do you pray to now?
That confuses a lot of non-Christians. Sorry, let me just back up a second. Oh, sorry, I had a thought and I lost it.
Well,
I had a senior moment.
freedom of religion can often be confused
Oh,
with oppression of other religions.
yeah, what I was going to say is that government is about how people interact with each other. And as societies get bigger and more integrated and span greater distances of culture and geography, government managing people's interactions with each other, secular government, becomes more important in those ways. Religion is about guiding people's relationships with God. And notice I used a different word. Government manages our relationships with each other. Religion, ideally, I would argue, guides our relationship with God. You cannot coerce faith. You can coerce behavior, and we can and did force people to go to church, force them to renounce, say, Catholicism or Judaism at risk of being burned at the stake, or Wicca. But you can't actually force people to believe what you want them to believe. You can only force them to behave as if they believe that if you create penalties. If people don't actually believe, you've accomplished nothing. And if you don't trust your religion enough for it to stand on its own merits, adding the force of government to it doesn't make it any more valid or credible. It means you've decided to bully what you couldn't persuade. On the other hand, government should leave religion alone, except where my religion interferes with your religion. And then government has to step in and referee, because now it's people clashing with each other, and there needs to be an outside referee. That is the role of secular government.
Now, I don't want to impugn anybody's religion. It's a good thing. It keeps the poor from wising up and murdering the rich. But what we see now is that many religious fundamentalists are Christian nationalists, are very involved with white nationalists and white supremacists. I don't know how you can coincide those things.
Because Jesus was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy with a shotgun and an American flag. What's wrong with you?
I thought he was Ethiopian.
No, and this is the Jesus of prosperity and hatred, by the way. This Jesus, the new Jesus, believes in teaching us who to hate so that we know who's our club and everybody else is the people we hate. And shotgun Jesus is blonde-haired and blue-eyed, narrow, straight nose, stuff like that.
Now, what I've seen is the influence of religion is so strong. Because the Spanish brought the Catholics here and oppressed the Native Americans so strong, even today, a lot of Native American men have a sexist attitude and are controlled by religion. So much so that when Native American Deb Howland in New Mexico was appointed to, I believe, Congress at first, none of the 9 Pueblos supported her, none of them. Yet once she got in, every one of them went to her and asked for help. When she became Secretary of the Interior, they all went to her for help. Now she's running for governor. Not one of the Pueblos will support her. They will not support a woman. When I was doing stand-up for like 35 years, I could tell you an African-American man would not laugh at me because I threatened his security. A Hispanic man would not laugh at a Hispanic woman. It threatened their security. And I say to you Native Americans now, don't withhold your vote because it threatens your security. I hear guys that tell me, I wouldn't watch those biatches on The View. And I tell them, well, unlike you, strong women don't scare me. And that really ticks them off. But we're seeing this thing. They wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. They wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. And what do we have now? Higher prices on gas, groceries, vehicles, and housing.
Well,
and
we have the golden sow, too.
Well, yeah, let's get to that.
Keep going.
And wait till it's harvest season. Wait till next year. They don't have enough money for diesel. They don't have the fertilizer they need. And they don't have enough people to harvest those crops. Now, Trump says he went to China and said, they're going to buy all our soybeans. They have us in a stranglehold right now. Don't kid yourself. But meanwhile, getting back to religion, the golden calf, the statue, tell people about that. And I think most of you know.
Well, evangelicals have built a giant golden statue of Trump at Mar-a-Lago. They have plans to build more. Trump is already saying this will be a landmark. Now, traditionally, statues get built of you after you die. And traditionally, America hasn't been big on golden statues in general. And certainly, you wouldn't expect that after the trillions that we spent to kill Saddam Hussein, we would pose Trump the same way that Saddam Hussein posed himself.
It looks identical. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same statue, except much larger around the middle.
They should have put a cheeseburger in each hand.
Right, it needed a stronger base, I think.
Well, Moses came down from Mount Sinai, smashed the first rendition of the Ten Commandments on a golden calf that they had. And what is the first? Thou shalt not have false gods or false idols before me.
Well, this guy was selected by Jesus, and we know that because the internet is full of pictures of Jesus giving Trump a shoulder massage.
Okay, well, understand this. Thy God is a zealous God. And look at the terms. The sword of doom, the Savior's servants, the army of God. These are things that scare you into doing things right. You're scared straight without a prison convict to slap you around. I don't know how you can justify the Ten Commandments and then worship a golden idol. Your thoughts on that? And don't be cynical toward our great president.
I'm actually amazed at what people who call themselves moral are tolerating from this guy because they imagine he's on their team. He wasn't on Giuliani's team. He's thrown pretty much all of his allies under the bus. He threw his own vice president under the bus before he even got reelected. If you think this guy is looking out for you, I'm like, tell us how you think that could be, right?
Explain to us briefly, if that's at all possible with him,
I heard that.
How the separation of church and state is an advantage to a nation.
Well, you were talking a little bit ago that the evangelicals want to reintroduce the Ten Commandments into classrooms. Well, the Ten Commandments have actually two components in them: how to behave in a civilized way and worship the Christian God, the Abrahamic God, I'll say, because it's the same God, whether you're Jewish, Islamic, or Christian, they all have Abrahamic roots. So I'm referring here to the Abrahamic God. And some of the rules in the Ten Commandments are part of our laws. For example, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Others are much more specific. Thou shalt not have false gods before me. Within a religion, you can make whatever religious rules you want. And the leverage that you have is God will be mad at you, will excommunicate you. You can't be in our club if you don't believe what we say to believe and live by the rules that we have. And that's fine. When I go into a dojo, I take my shoes off. But the government shouldn't require us all to take our shoes off when we enter any building. We respect the rules of the dojo, or we don't get to be members of the dojo. If you want to be Buddhist, you have to, and this is why I do not call myself Buddhist, by the way, you have to follow the dogma of Buddhism. And there are certain rules and things in there that either look irrelevant to me or for whatever other reason I'm not part of. If you're going to say you're Christian, you have to follow certain Christian rules. All that is fine, but the role of the state is to manage how we interact with each other, not how we interact with God. And keeping those roles separate benefits both roles. It benefits religion because faith is actually voluntary faith. And it benefits government because you can't accommodate all the rules of all religions simultaneously within one government unless you're willing to oppress everybody but one group, which is exactly what the white Christian nationalists want. It's the opposite of democracy.
You remember I said briefly, right? Anyhow, moving on, if you've ever seen the movie Hillbilly, you'll get a completely different view of people. It begins with, it's a documentary, and it begins with a woman saying, in a thick Southern accent, every movie, when they want to show someone that's stupid, they show them with a Southern accent. When they want to show someone that's arrogant, they show them with a lilting Southern accent. We're not all stupid, we're not all arrogant, but it's come to the point where we feel bad of ourselves. It has, and that's not right. A lot of these are good people, but that's why so many of them want someone to speak up for them and do something for them. My Asian wife, came to me one day and she said, "What is this languages, Ma, Pa?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "On TV." So I go and she's watching Andy of Mayberry. She thought it was a separate language. Accents, and I think it's cruel. And now I realize that I was cruel too. I would do that same thing when I was doing stand-up. I would make fun. When I did a dumb person, they'd have an accent. And the idiom is, never make fun of a person with an accent. They usually know one more language than you do.
I was just thinking the same thing. Whenever I hear an accent, if I don't know anything else about that person, I know that they know one more language than I do. And honestly, accents, I think, add to the color and beauty of language. oftentimes. They certainly don't tell me how smart or dumb somebody is, except that they can learn 2 languages and that they have traveled from another culture, which takes a certain amount of strength of character.
Bravery.
Yeah, bravery.
Ultimate bravery.
Yeah.
My ex, her husband, would always make fun of her accent and try and get her not to use it in public, which I thought was horrible because she had a beautiful accent. It was very delicate and very telling and very intelligent in the things she would say. And I think that's too bad when we impose our language. And don't think we don't have an accent. I'm from the Midwest. I was in Louisiana. A woman said, "Are you from France?" I said, "No." She goes, "What is that accent?" And the guy next to me said, "That's a lack of a good education is what that is." And he was right in my case. In the Midwest, we roll our R's. I went to the river with my father and my brother, and we had dinner. We don't realize it, but we do. And instead of saying a word like Wisconsin, I've been in another state and people would say, "You're from Wisconsin?" Because every area we developed an accent, don't you think?
Right. But I tend to like these regionalisms, and I think a lot of the different American accents we've become more familiar with them because of media and TV and things like that. And so I don't think Southern accents have the same negative connotation they used to have anymore. I've heard myself in I used to have to speak Spanish a lot in the course of my work, but I never got very good at it, and my accent was terrible. But the Spanish speakers I was interacting with were universally kind and supportive, and they'd correct my pronunciation, and they'd teach me a few new words and stuff. And it was a positive experience all the way around. But when people from other countries try to speak English and they have a dense accent or a limited vocabulary, we're like the French. We give them a really hard time about it. There's a kind of arrogance to that I think is not a good look for us.
Well, understand this. A certain segment of American society likes to use a foreign word because they think it makes them look better. We don't go to the beauty salon anymore. We go to the salon.
The salon.
And we don't have whipped cream anymore. We have creme fraiche. You shut up. Well, yeah,
there is
just
sort of
knock
a thing,
it off.
and sometimes I fall into it just because of, like the books I've read and stuff.
Well, you're so arrogant.
We use a French word when we have a perfectly good English word, but it sounds like I would like my pie a la mode instead of can you put a scoop of ice cream on it, or something, or like dining al fresco, which doesn't mean what I thought it did, and I'm not allowed to that restaurant anymore.
Well, I have a friend, Anders Berg, from Sweden, and he runs a good business in Phoenix called Sweet Clean. Real nice guy. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, "Do you know how flowery and useless the majority of the English language is?" He said, "Why don't you take your dictionary and spell everything phonetically?" He said, "Do you know how much easier, and when you think of the English language, CKCHSH, I had a Hispanic friend say, "Hey, Pete, how many S's in the word chicken?" Because that's how flowery and screwed up this language is. Why did English develop so ultimately hard?
English is essentially a Germanic language. Old English is actually a language. It doesn't just mean English from a long time ago. It was actually a specific language. It's the one King Arthur and Chaucer spoke. And maybe not King Arthur, but Chaucer. And it was a Germanic language. So the word knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, was once pronounced Knecht and things like that. And so a lot of the old spellings have to do with old pronunciations that have evolved over time. In modern British speakers who have sort of the most common British accent, I'm forgetting the name of it, but they don't pronounce a lot of the R's. So pita could mean pita bread, or it could mean my friend Peter, right? Interestingly, that was actually lost after America was colonized. So when America was colonized, the British were using R's the same way we do. And then later, like we have a Harvard accent, one of their Ivy League schools got in the habit of dropping the R's, and that became an affectation that British people took on to sound more educated. And sounding more educated is a two-edged sword. Like, I know very well that my accent is academic. Like, if that's an accent, I have it. Mm-hmm. And I know that it can be off-putting to people. It's not intentional. It's not an affectation. It really is the way I think. But it's not actually useful to me. It sounds like I'm trying to mimic a Harvard guy or a Cambridge person or something. And that's what the dropping of the R meant for the British. So now it sounds to the British like the Americans have corrupted the language by using R the way we do. But actually they dropped it's called a rhotic sound, R-H-O-T-I-C.
Not to bring her up too much, but my ex-Malaysian wife spoke, I believe, 5 languages. And I told that to, when she was present, to Lin Sukuni, who was the news anchor. And she goes, well, Mandarin, that's the same as Chinese. And she had 2 small Asian children. And so my wife said something in Mandarin to them. They had no idea. Some of the dialects get so detached. What is the deal with Irish language and Gaelic language?
Irish language is Gaelic language.
Well, you can say that, but when I was there, they spoke English with this heavy Baroque thing. They didn't speak Gaelic.
So that's an accent, not a language.
Okay.
Gaelic is a language which is fading away. There are some efforts being made to preserve it, and the Irish rightly recognize it as a core part of their heritage. But they're part of the British Isles. English is the lingua. This is hilarious. Latin was once the lingua franca in the English-speaking world. So wow. I just like that juxtaposition. But anyway, so Gaelic is a language. It's a language that preceded the Anglo-Saxons, and which has not died out, but it's a lot less commonly spoken now. Scots also speak Gaelic, and I believe Irish and Scottish Gaelic would sound different between them, but I don't have an ear for that.
There is a small island nation that they used to communicate through whistles. Now, my question is it important to keep languages alive? As the melting pot of the world melts together more and more with the worldwide media that we can see, is it important to keep ancient languages alive? Do we learn anything from them, or is it basically just... Is it a buggy whip that we don't need anymore?
I've thought that one over a lot. I tend to like rules that apply universally. I tend to not like rules that are different for this group than that group. So one of the reasons there's a lot of discussion of preserving cultures is because the Western European colonists were so hell-bent on obliterating other cultures and replacing them with their own. But the backlash has been, I've actually read authors who say we should stop teaching classical Greek and Roman literature and things like that because of the hegemony that they exert in the world of higher education and classical education. I think if you're going to say we need to preserve cultures, that would include preserving Western European culture, which has its roots in Greco-Roman culture. And if you're going to say, well, no, we'll just go with best practices, then we don't need to worry about preserving archaic languages or Aramaic or something like that it would be okay to lose them. But I don't know which side of that debate I'd rather be on. But what I would say is, you can't say let's preserve every culture except Western European culture. That's going to create the culture war that we're in right now, and it's not turning out well. So either we need to try to preserve all the cultures, or preserving culture is less important than extracting best practices from among them. And that's a discussion I would like to hear more about. Send us your thoughts on that.
We're going to run over a little bit because I want to get into one more subject before we're done. And it's topical, so I want to do it now. Over the weekend, there was a roast of comedian Kevin Hart, young African-American guy. I don't care for his constant yelling, but that's a style. And he's very funny. People love him. He's very good. But the roast got so raunchy, and they were making jokes about George Floyd and pretty racist and sexist. And that it's getting a lot of backlash. I think they got to rein it in. I'm not a fuddy-duddy, believe me. I can lay down four-letter words you can walk on across a bridge. But, and I don't know where the origin of the roast is. When I first came in contact with it was the Friars Club in New York, a club for entertainers, where once a year they would roast someone and then they would give the money to charity. And then it became pretty popular. Dean Martin, in fact, had a television show where they would roast someone. But it had to be clean because it was on TV at that time. They had standards and practices. And then Comedy Central started it. But I think they made the mistake of always having the same comedians. So they couldn't use the same joke. So they go on new material, new put-down material over and over again till they're running thin. And then they started to do racist jokes and more out there trying to outdo their buddies. And I think they've worn the genre out. Your thoughts?
Well, I can actually remember when cynical humor was kind of cutting edge. And Lenny Bruce broke down a lot of barriers and began the now current standard practice of using humor for social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
But two things have changed. One is that was more than 50 years ago. In fact, Lenny Bruce precedes me, although I'm aware of his career. And I think that kind of cynical humor has become passé. Also, I remember when we used to have chop fights, or African Americans had what they called the dozens. And the thing about those was they were all about cleverness. They were all about thinking rapidly, quickly in the moment, and coming up with a rhyme or something snappy or something ironic. And nowadays, these roasts and much of modern cynical humor is just cruel and crude. So it's both passé and shallow compared to its roots. And I think it's time to say, okay, we've been there, done that, let's move on. Cynical humor, I think, is about as relevant now as rotary phones.
Well, speaking of passé and shallow, I'm done. So that's our show for this week.
Passé, I'm shallow.
Yeah, we do a vaudeville act. It's great. I'll get you an audition with my psychiatrist. He loves animal acts. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, don't die dumb.